Right. Okay. So welcome. Welcome to my masterclass for technical drawing. As I said, for those of you coming in the waiting room, I can see a number of familiar faces, whether it be through previous classes, whether it be people I've been chatting with on Instagram, and I can see obviously some of you have actually I've had some really great chats on the phone with. So to everybody, welcome. This is going to be a practical session, but again, it just want to put it in the context of what technical drawing actually is. So I am going to give you a little bit of an overview to start with, oh, there we go. Starting with who I am. Now, you're not here to hear my history, but at the same time, it's important for you to understand why I am able to teach this and what my credentials are. So I'm 20 plus years in the industry. I'm a bench trained jeweler, and I've designed for household names, both it's as a freelancer and also collaborations. And I continue to design for private clients around the world. So whenever I teach, yes, I teach the classic ABCs. I was trained very classically. I was a Central St. Martin's graduate and I am now full circle back. I also teach at Central St. Martin's, but I also have very much evolved how I teach to be able to kind of effectively, I teach how I work. So a lot of it has adapted over the years to be able to really showcase the way I have kind of sort of the kind of tips and tricks in terms of industry knowledge. I was in Hong Kong for 14 years. So I know a few of you from my who are there as well. But I'm now in the UK, but we still have a workshop school that we teach craftsmanship. And so through that, I have also created training programs for brands such as Chanel, Tiffany's, and Sotheby's. As I said, continue to teach for Central St. Martin's. And through the school that I set up in Hong Kong, we have taught thousands of students, of which hundreds have now gone on to launch successful careers. Some of them have been within the industry, working for other people. Others have been actually creating their own brands. So it's very much, my motto is always, what's next? How can we support people to kind of take their next steps? And it doesn't always have to be in the context of launching your own brand, but a lot of the time it is. What is technical drawing? So obviously you're all here for technical drawing. I love that so many people are so enthused at the idea of hand drawing. Obviously, I have such admiration for people who do CAD work. I'm not a CAD specialist. When I do need CAD work, I do work with a specialist, but my skills are very much in the hand drawn and hand painted arena. So as I said, a lot of times people kind of have a context of what it is and the fact that you still kind of have a quite a singular use for it. It's very kind of versatile, actually, much more so than people realize. So starting right at the beginning of the design stages. So when I say that, when we're talking about design, for those of you who've been in design classes with me, scale matters. So it's very important we are able to understand the context of a piece. So scale means proportions. So when you understand how to create technical drawings, when you're designing, you can apply some of that kind of early and quick sketch visual language, as it were, to help you actually create designs at the early stages that are still scale appropriate. So it starts right at the beginning of the process. Of course, it's a blueprint. So from 2D to finished piece. So it's creating literally a roadmap for production, whether you are making yourself or you are creating it as a blueprint for a workshop, a production house, whatever it might be. And that is probably the most kind of widely used application for it. Of course, costing and pricing. So I've got here an example of one of my commissions where you can see I was costing up the variations based on specific gemstones. So this client was actually, we were matching in and out different gemstones. And because everything was millimeter precise to 2 decimal points, we were then able to manage the costs very closely. This is important, not just for bespoke work, but if you're creating collections, anything in that arena, it's very important because actually what it allows you to do is make sure you stay in budget, which, as we all know, in terms of the cost of raw materials, that is really important. And lastly, for those of you who have come through Instagram and know me for more of the illustration work, it actually is a really great tool when you're creating illustrations. So I've got a couple of examples here that if you're creating something that you are going to present to a client, you can, or for yourself, but if you're creating it where you're then actually going to illustrate it as well, you can draw it, you can scan it, reduce the opacity, don't print it a heavy print like 100% opacity, reduce it down to at least 50%, so it's very much a faint outline, but when you print that onto your illustration paper, that means you don't have to completely redraw your piece, you can illustrate it, and then when you come back, if you need to make any final edits to the original drawing and the technical drawing before you add your dimensions, that's what you're able to do. So you can see how it is a time saver while still delivering a sort of a hand finished piece. So it doesn't detract from your ability to create fine artwork, but it allows you to manage your time well. So that's just a quick overview of what technical drawing is and how many different applications it can have. So we're now going to get drawing. And so I'm going to switch over onto my other screen. I'm just going to check in. Okay, and for those of you who are new in, if anyone has any questions, obviously because I'm not watching the chat, please just pop it in the chat, and Chris, the moderator, will pick up any chats or any questions. So just please keep an eye on that. And I will be doing a Q&A at the end. So we're now going to, I'm going to have two screens open, okay? So this is where you guys are going to get your pencils out. So the one on the left is the video. This, as I said, for those of you who have been in live talk classes with me, I do normally do a webcam, but just to ensure that we didn't have any technical hiccups, I pre-recorded this a couple of days ago. But what you're going to be looking at and building is this design that I have in Photoshop here. And the reason I've popped it in Photoshop is because before I get you to actually start drawing, I'm just going to talk you through the key stages. The most important thing for technical drawing is the grid. If your grid isn't accurate, then your drawing isn't accurate. Now, what I'm also going to do is just pop this in here. So you can see here that red grid, that square, that's what you're going to start with. So whilst we are whilst we're getting everyone settled in, I want everyone to start with drawing a square. And when as people are used to my lessons, I don't pre-prescribe the dimensions after the first class, but the first one I'm going to give you all dimensions to keep it consistent. And this is the only time I'm going to give you a dimension in centimeters. From after this, everything will be in millimeters. But I want you to create a square that is 8 centimeters by 8 by 8 by 8. Okay, so you can see here, if I'm just going to run that through, I'm just going to create a centimeter, 8 centimeters there. Now you can see on this one, I've extended it past the corners. The reason for that, and I'm now just going to pull this further down so we can see a little bit more. I'm just going to release this. Now, if I zoom in, now for anyone worrying, please, this particular sketch will be in a folder that will be shared with you alongside the 2 templates that I'm going to give everyone who's in the masterclass. That is 2 additional practice templates. So you will get this as well, which I know is going to be a useful reference for anyone as you practice. So if I zoom right in addition to the square, you can see this diagonal purple line coming all the way up here, okay? Now that purple line, can you see that that is actually where I create a right angle which drops down, okay? So as we go along and it hits that diagonal and comes down here, what that is doing is creating the proportions for the side view. So we're going to start with our top view when we start drawing, and the top view, the stone is centered on the corner, on the top left corner. When we pull those lines down to the through finger view, this is literally called the through finger view because we're looking through the finger, you can see that we actually have the center of the shank, the ring size, is where the corner of the square is going to sit. And then when we connect that bottom left to upper right corner, these green lines, when they touch that purple line and come down, they are then basically taking that rotation that we're seeing on the horizontal and then creating them for the vertical. So this, on a very simple technical drawing, to be honest, you don't really need to do that. You can simply go top view, through finger view, and side view. However, if you get used to drawing like this, what it allows you to do is, as you build more complexity, you can see any kind of information up here. As we rotate it round, it's much easier to remain controlled, precise, and accurate about transferring it, because everything else on the top view are vertical lines you can see are going to pull down, and you're going to see them hit the through finger view. And when we construct the through finger view and then pull them across to the side view, we're adding information that then pertains to the next viewpoint. But because the top view and the side view are not connected with the through finger view, we're creating the inverse option by taking that diagonal all the way up. Okay, so once everyone has their square, what we're going to do is I'm going to just pull this through a little bit more. I'm going to scroll this through. I'm going to show you the quick sketch. So I mapped this out to make sure that I could have an easy sort of follow through. I wanted to make sure the different perspectives would be easy to follow in this time frame. So the reason I also wanted to show you this versus this, don't worry about your technical drawing looking perfectly crisp. Okay, this is obviously going to be a swift way of working through it. Think of it like your version of taking notes. So if it's looking a little bit, let's put it rustic, that's fine. So if it's looking a bit more sort of like you need to do a kind of, you'd like to redo it, that's absolutely fine. What I want everyone to walk away from today with is the understanding of it. In all of my classes, the most important thing for me is that you understand the process and you can apply it independently, not that you end up with a perfect drawing at the end of it. Obviously that's great, but the key is making sure that you actually have an understanding to work independently. Okay, so we are going to, once you have your square, we're going to connect those corners bottom left to top right. Okay, so for those of you who've recently just joined in, we are creating a square that is 8 centimeters by 8 centimeters, and we're connecting the bottom left to the top right. Okay. Okay, yes, no, we do not. Thank you for the additional question. No, I've only highlighted the different colored lines for your reference. Don't worry, you're just working in plain pencil. If when you're coming to practice, or you have got your original practice, once you've done this, if you want to make notes on it, go over with a highlighter, then you can just maybe take a highlighter and go over your main square, maybe take a highlighter, a different color, and go over other ones, just to help you reference which lines reference which dimensions. But in terms of what you're drawing, no, you don't need to be doing it. This is just for your ease of reference. So once we've done that, we need dimensions to then actually draw. So what I'm going to do, you can see I'm going to draw them up here, which is, I'm going to scroll through here, but I'm going to jump over here and show you what I actually wrote. So there are 2 sets of dimensions for this. We have the actual dimensions, and then we have what I call the as drawn dimensions. So the as drawn are going to be referencing.
Meeting is being recorded.
I am just going to take a bright red pointer and highlight. Oh, that's not bright red. That's, there we go. So can you see there in the middle, I've got 2 to 1. That is my ratio. Your ratio is crucial for your ratio is crucial for technical drawing because you are able to see and you're able to reference your dimensions into from a real life dimension, which is going to be small. You were talking about a ring, and we're going to scale it up to a manageable drawing. Okay, so we're looking at a manageable drawing size. If you're creating a ring that is an internal diameter of, and you can see here, I've done my internal diameter is 16 mm. If you're going to draw at that size, you're already restricting yourself. So I do all of my technical drawings to a minimum of 2:1. Okay. Now, if you want to then scale up bigger than that, that's fine. Just be wary about going too much beyond that because it then starts to kind of crowd the outside of the paper. So I'd say the maximum I go between 2 to 2.5:1. For the ease of the maths here, I'm sticking 2:1. Okay. So I've done an emerald cut, which is just a square with the corners cut, which is or a square emerald cut, which is what I focused on here. If you want to simply just do a square, that would be a princess cut. So I'm doing it as a 7 by 7 mm. And you can see I've done a couple of little kind of quick sketch references. When you're first practicing technical drawing, I recommend making sure that you just put a little reference. It could be a note. It doesn't have to be a drawing, but it's just so you know what dimensions you are referencing. As you become more experienced, you can just put a couple of key dimensions like your gemstones, your ring size, and your ratio. One thing you will always do is have your ratio. I have thousands of technical drawings in my archives, and they range from 2 to 2.5 to 3 in terms of 3:1 ratio. It's really important that I know what the ratio for each of them is. So always make sure that at the minimum you write your ratio. So we've got 7 by 7, a depth of 4, a ring size of 16 millimeters. Now, because I'm based in the UK, I have clients all over the world. I was in Hong Kong for 14 years. So as a result, I do not rely on ring sizes that, a US sizing, a UK sizing. It's too messy. I always work in millimeters only. It's universal, and it means it's much more reliable because I'm also not then reliant on slight variation in ring sizing sort of systems, and which can give you a 0.5 mil difference. 0.5 mil, depending on your location, can be an entire ring size. So it is important to be precise. So we've got that. And then 2.5 mil is the ring. I'm going to go here, which is this one. That is the ring width. That is different from the ring thickness, which is here, which I've just put this little one here. That's ring thickness, and it's 1.5, and that one is this dimension here. So the ring width and the ring thickness are two different dimensions. If I can see a couple of people who have joined who I know from our chat are craftsmen, you will probably have your own natural tolerances that you would know. I, by default, never do anything less than 1.5 mil in terms of thickness. Realistically, even that's probably a little bit on the slim side, depending on if it's got something, if you've got a center stone to it, I probably would average about 1.65 to 1.7 as my ring thickness. But again, that's something that you just get used to. So if you're sitting there going, what would it be? Don't worry, that's something you would just get used to, and you'd end up having a little bit of a default for if it's a bigger stone, you would counterbalance it with a little bit more. But again, that's something with experience you would just adjust accordingly. So once we've got those dimensions, you're then going to, because we're going 2:1, simply double them. And everything, so all the dimensions we have here, we are just going to double it here. And in doubling it, we are then giving ourselves the as drawn dimensions, which is what we're then going to draw with. So I'm going to leave those up so you can see those on the side. Let me just pull that there. And I'm going to show you the order with which we do it next. So what we're going to do, we're going to measure the dimensions to be able to draw the stone. Now, as I said, I'm worked with a square emerald cut, or you can just work on a princess cut, so that if people don't have a template, you don't have to worry about freehanding a round stone. If you were doing a round stone, you would follow the same process, but instead of the actual outline that we're going to create, which is, you can see here, instead of the lines that we've got here, 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 and here, which create the outlines of the stone, you would actually then draw the circle in the middle of it. So you wouldn't do anything differently. You would just add one more step. So let me just make sure everyone can see those dimensions as you're getting those in place. And then we are going to add the lines for the, I'll pull this along here, for the stone. So because we're going doubled and we top left of our square, we're going to go 7 mil to the left, 7 mil to the right, 7 mil above, and 7 mil below the lines, our vertical and our horizontal lines. So what that is going to then do is give you, I'm just going to scroll it through a little bit quicker so you can see, it's going to give you that, okay? So in giving you that, that has now given us the outline for the actual stone itself, okay? You can see I've extended those lines to the right, so they're actually meeting that diagonal, and I've extended them down so that they are then coming down to create the build of information I need for the through finger view beneath it, okay? It's very important when we're doing technical drawings that you do not see it as 3 separate drawings. This is one drawing from 3 viewpoints. The best way to think about it is a bit like origami. It's almost like it's unfolding. So every piece of information on one viewpoint is giving you information for the next, and it unfolds into the next. Obviously, this is a pattern for a ring. Earrings, pendants, necklaces would have a different grid pattern, but obviously one of the most commonly used one is the ring, so that's what we're doing. Okay. Now, once we have this in place, we are now going to build all of our vertical lines. All right. So with that, oh, let me just get your hand out of the way, Natalie. So which vertical lines are they? We're going to refer back to the information we have on the right-hand side. So where we've got 16 mil as our ring size, think about it's going to be 32 as drawn. So when we come back to this, because we're then going to use the center line, which is basically the square line, and we're going to use that as the center of the stone, we want the total width to be 32 millimeters. So we're going to go 16 to the left and 16 to the right. So if I just scroll that along here, I'm measuring from the center line, which obviously just is this one here. And this is the one in terms of the color, as you practice, if it's helpful just to put a little highlighter just to make sure you know which line you're referencing, that's fine. And as you build on more complex designs where you've got side stones, halos, etc., then you're going to have more and more and more grid lines appearing. Then yes, I would recommend maybe making a little note of it. And actually, I've just thought I'm going to add one more document in the shared folder, which is actually a reference one of a round stone, but it also shows where I've given little code numbers to the top of each of them. So actually, I'll give you a bonus one, so I'll drop that into the folder as well. So it helps you as you build more complex designs. So I'm just going to scroll along so you can see I'm measuring 16 mil to the left, 16 mil to the right, and I'm going to draw those lines vertically. Okay, so if I just come back to here at this point, it's this line here. I'm just actually going to do it live there, and this line here. So those are the lines we're actually now creating. And then once you've done those, we are going to add the last of the vertical lines. So you want to create all of the verticals before we then move on to the through finger view. Now at this point, you might be going, but Natalie, where's the piece of jewelry? Doing technical drawing, the grid is about 75% of the drawing. If you think about it, whenever I always kind of liken it to cooking, it's your prep work. As everyone knows, prep is far more time consuming than the actual cooking. That's basically the same process. So we're doing the prep work, and that I just one question that I am frequently asked, and I'm preempting it in case anyone does ask it, and also making sure everyone's getting time to draw their lines in. Why not use grid paper? I never use grid paper because grid paper is very useful for your first couple of lines to make sure they're perpendicular to the edge of the paper. After that, all those grid lines are is just extra visual noise. So you want to be able to create custom grids, and actually you want less is more. You want essential but minimal number of lines. Otherwise, you just end up creating something that's super messy. So the grid paper actually can become counterproductive after the first couple of lines. However, I actually do all of my technical drawing on illustration paper for other reasons, which I build on in kind of more advanced types of drawing. But actually, with what you can do when you're working with tracing paper, you can actually, if you have just one or two pieces of grid paper, also keep it cheap and cheerful. You only need one. You don't need to draw on it. Just slide it behind your tracing paper. Use the grid paper to help just get those perpendicular lines in place. And then when you're done with it, get it out of the way. It's done its purpose and you still have a clean sheet of paper. So just preempting a question I do get asked a lot. So once we've got that, the last of our verticals is going to be the ring thickness. Remember, not the ring width, the thickness, which is this one here. So 1.5 in real life, which makes it 3 millimeters in reality. So for this one, I'm not measuring it from here. I'm actually going to measure it from the edge here and the edge here. So I'm going to then measure 3 mil to the left and 3 millimeters to the right. Now you can see I just did a secondary point of reference. Whenever you're starting to build your grid and those lines are getting narrower and narrower, it's very important you have 2 points of reference before you draw a line. Otherwise, it's very easy to end up with wonky lines. So I always do a 1 point and a second point to secure a nice parallel line. And then scroll all the way along, and you can see I've then got my 2 lines in place to the left and to the right of the ring size. So just to confirm, we now have the ring, the center stone, which as you've drawn it will be 14 in millimeters. The ring size, as you've drawn it, will be 32. And then the ring thickness, not width, is 3 and 3 on either side. Okay. Yes. Okay. Let me just double check. Yes, I will just recap the measurements. And as I said, I will also, this particular scan will be in the shared document with your bonus templates. So you will also have this as your reference as well. But yes, I will recap the measurements. Okay. Right, once we've got this, we're then going to move on to the through finger view. Okay. So no, we're not. Ignore me. I'm adding the top. I think at this point I was like, oh, I think they're probably going to be wanting to add a start drawing some jewelry in. So I think I might have preempted some descent in the ranks. So I'm actually adding the stone in place so you can start seeing it come to life. So again, if at this point you were adding the round stone, you would simply put this in the center. For an emerald cut, we're simply cutting the corners. For a princess cut, you don't need to do anything. The square is the outline of the stone. Okay, so I'm just going to now position that in place. Now, just checking which one I popped next. That is our ring width. So 2.5 millimeters as drawn, 5 millimeters. Well, I'm using the center line, but because we're going horizontally here, so if I come back up here, we're using the horizontal line, top line of the square. I'm going to go 2.5 to get the 2.5 above and below, I'm measuring 2.5 on either side to create 5 mil total. Remember, we're doubling everything. So I'm measuring it above and below to create my horizontal lines that will then be the lines that we will then be putting the ring shank into. So shank, band, same thing, but just if you're like, what's the shank? The ring shank is the band. So you can see we've now got the width on the top. Now, what I'm just going to show you here is the reference. Now, you don't have to do this at this point, but I'm just wanting to show you why we start to use the diagonal. If you're ready and you've got to this point, then you wanted all of the lines that are extending to the right-hand side and are then meeting that diagonal that has gone from the lower left to the upper right of the square. By then turning them 90 degrees at the point that they touch that line, we are then creating the dimensions for the side view. Now, as I said, this is one of those techniques which in a simple ring, you don't necessarily need to do this. And sometimes it can be it won't necessarily save you time, but it's a useful just habit to get into. If it's easier at this point to simply just take the dimension that you've got here and replicate it, just measure it across here, that's fine. If you find that easier and quicker at this point, the result is the same. What I want you to understand is by creating that right angle on the top right-hand side, we're creating the start for being able to build more complex designs that would have halos and side stones. Okay, so but said, if you find at this point it's just easier to just lift the dimensions of the center stone and just replicate them on the side. Again, it's a square. I've purposely gone for a square stone so that your dimensions this way and your dimensions this way are the same. I'm just going to pull all these off so we've got less noise going on. Then it's all going to be the same dimensions. If it was a traditional emerald cut, you would see it would go above and below. These two would be the same, but actually this one would be longer. And that's the point at which having that rotation from the top right helps us remain accurate. So once we've got that in place, this is the point where for those of you who have a compass, then time to crack it open. If you don't, please don't worry, but I would recommend not trying to freehand it. You're better off just creating, just using a ruler to measure the point at which the compass would touch. And then when you are able to, just go back in with a compass. Okay, so what we're doing is because the compass point is sitting on the corner of the square here, we're then going to create, we want it to create the radius all the way around here. Okay, so remember, total width is 32. So actually the compass point will sit in the center and extend out 16 millimeters to then, I'm just going to put that in place. So you can then see I'm going to put my compass in place. I always make sure that when I'm using a compass that you are sure that it's hitting the right markers. So don't just put it in place and swivel it. It's very easy to end up going a little bit skew if it hasn't sat completely perfectly. I'm then pulling it out, keeping the center in place. I've pulled it out to then meet the outer lines, which are 3 mil further out, which then gives us the ring thickness. And that is then going to give me the side view on the ring. Okay, so as I said, for those of you who don't have a compass, don't worry about it, but just put a ruler mark there, and a ruler mark there, same here and here. And then you're basically creating the square, and then you can come and add it in afterwards. Okay. Right. I'm going to just swivel along. Then we're going to start creating the information we need for the side view. Okay. So as we come along to the side view, we want the inside as well as in the outside lines. And I'm just lining my ruler up. So you can see I am eyeballing it because I'm used to it and I feel quite comfortable with my eyes. To be honest, your most accurate tool are your eyes, but if you need to just double check and just adjust with a measurement, just pop an additional measurement, and that's fine. So what we're going to do is then start. Oh, I'm going to scroll through to a minute. We're going to then start back on the top to build the top view on the stone. So at this point, we now have the key information. We have the stone width on the side view. We have the shank height. The one thing that we as yet do not have is the stone height, and we will come to that once we've done the stone here, because you can see I'm adding the inside of my table. So just to clarify, the terminology for those of you who don't know, the outside of the stone is the girdle. That also is the one that denotes the actual shape of it. From the girdle, that little slant upwards to the flat surface is your crown, and the flat surface is the table. Okay, so I'm just marking in place my crown here because, as you can see here, if I zoom in, those turquoise lines, which are coming from the top view down to the through finger view and then across, are actually positioning where the crown ends and the table starts in the technical drawing, from all dictated from that top view. Okay. Now, I would also say this, I've not measured this one. This is just, I'm giving it as it's a relatively, I'd say, quite a generous size crown. Different cuts will have different sizes of table. Unless you are working on a specific stone, you could work on a relatively general dimension of, I like to do kind of 3/5 in three-fifths in the middle, 2/5 on either side for the dimension of the crown. But again, you can just use this by eye. If you're working with a specific stone or a cut that has a particular dimension, something like a princess cut has got quite a wide table, again, you can adjust accordingly. But we're starting to get into slightly more technical specifics, which I don't want to kind of throw too much at you too soon. So if I then just see, you can see I'm just adding that square, and then I'm mirroring those cut corners to then create my emerald cut shape. Again, if you're simply just doing a square as a princess cut, then you can leave it as is. And I'm just going to add my, yeah, you can see I'm adding my claws. Now, to add a claw, I'm just going to do a quick sketch on here. If your edge is here, one thing I see quite often is someone puts a claw like that. That it's sitting on top of, not coming around. So when you're adding a claw, you always have to have a piece of metal that comes around the side and then goes over the top. So for the purposes of this one, this is just showing you a tapered claw. The same would apply if you have a round claw, so you'd have just a rounded one, or if you want a double taper, so you would have that little, almost like how we used to draw, like almost like flying birds when we were younger. And then you could just do it like that, obviously, with a little more precision when you're drawing it, but you can see if you're doing that double taper. So there are lots of ways to be able to draw, so long as it comes over the edge is the most important thing. Okay, so position that in place, and then we have our, once we've, went back to it, and we are, scroll. And then we have our stone with the claws in place for the top view. All right. Now I'm just going to go here. You can see here, I'm now adding the ring shank. Now, if I zoom in here, you can see those two little D-shaped corners. If I come back here, these are the corners. So if you have looking at, let's say, a classic D shape, that's what you would see here. If you had a knife edge, you would draw it as a knife edge, obviously in place. If you had it squared off, it would square off. So the silhouette of the the shank is visible here, and it would then also be visible down here. Okay, remember it's a circle, so whatever you see on the top view, you're going to see on the side view. Okay, so for ease, just keep it as a classic D shape, and it will sit in between, in this space here. Okay, it very rarely will take up the whole space unless you're literally doing a rounded one, so just sitting it halfway is fine, and then you can just connect it to the edge of the stone here. Now if you want to take it all the way, I would just, for ease and speed, keep it straight, but you could see if you wanted to, you can taper it in. That's obviously depending on your design. Okay, so once you have that in place, you can see we've now got the top view in place. We're now going to start building our through finger and side. Now the through finger and the side view are basically, for the purposes of this, because it's a square stone, so anything that's symmetrical, so a square, a round, square emerald, because your side view and your through finger are matching dimensions, we're basically going to do one and we're going to replicate it on the other. The only difference being obviously on this one, where the shank comes in to meet it here, actually on this side, that shank would actually then be obscuring some of our view here. But actually the construction of the setting on both is the same. So once you've got on one, it's the same on the other. Obviously, as you move into different shape, different types of designs, and as you move into elongated stones, that would change. Okay, so we're going to draw the stone from a side perspective. So you can see at this point, I'm just looking at my dimensions, 4 mil here. So I'm doubling it to 8 as drawn. And I'm going to measure up 8 millimeters. And then you can see, coming back to just referencing that turquoise line is telling me where the angle here of the stone from the table to the girdle being the outline of the stone, is going to be in position. So that's what I've measured in place. So you can see I've marked up with those two little lines there. That's where the flat point of the table then moves to a slant towards the edge. And then if I scroll a little bit further, you can then see I've added that in. Now, this depth here, this point here, the girdle, so the one I've just drawn on here, I'm not giving you that dimension, but because it's to an element, it's a little bit arbitrary. It does depend on the stone cut, but for general purposes, you can use an average of sort of 22 to 25% of the total depth of the stone. So let's say if you've got a stone that is, if you're 5 mil deep, you're drawing it 10 mil, 22% would be 2.2 millimeters. So that's just how you would measure that. Now that does vary depending on the cut. So something like a princess cut will have a much shallower crown, so the girdle will be much higher up. Something like an old mine cut will have a much deeper crown, so the girdle will be lower down, so that angle will be a little bit more pronounced. Again, that will just come with experience as you get used to different stone cuts if you're not used to it already. So let's come over here. I'm just going to continue to scroll through. You can see I'm going to do that because they are exactly the same. What I've done on one, I'm doing on the other. Now, because I've done a square emerald cut, I'm also just adding in these 2 dimensions where those corners are. And because it's an emerald cut, not a princess cut, and again, actually, I'm going to add one more thing into the shared folder. You can see the silhouette of the pavilion, and the pavilion is what's happening from the girdle to the bottom of the stone. The pavilion in an emerald cut is a bit more bottom heavy. It's not a straight line. It comes out, as you can see, in that slight diagonal. Okay, so once you have the silhouette of your stone in place, we are then going to position your claws. You're going to create your setting. Now, for the purposes of this one, I'm actually now going to jump over onto here because it's going to be easier to see this in this form. Okay. Now, the best way to think about it is a coffee cup. Okay. So let's say I'm going to create, and I'm just going to do a very simple shape here. So to create a coffee cup, think about this shape as the base of the coffee cup, and the claws are just popping out the top. Okay. So we have the coffee cup here. It's always going to, the stone is sitting inside it, not right to the bottom of it, because the metal has depth to it. It has thickness. So if you just simply draw it as an outline, you're painting it on. We want to create it as a solid object. So let me just clarify. So you're sitting it outside these lines. However, it never goes past the girdle. Okay. And then you're going to create your little claws. So you can see up here, a claw will never go to the top of the crown. Otherwise, it's going to be covering far too much of the total surface area. And then you're going to come around, you're going to bend it down and connect it. Okay. Now, you can see based on this design, it's easier to do it based on the one I've followed, because it's a square. Actually, the claws are on the corner. The one I was doing there, actually, the claws being a little bit further in would be appropriate for when you're working on a round stone, because actually the claws don't sit right on the corners. So you can see what you're going to do. You're going to create that coffee cup shape on either side, bend those corners over the top to create your claw and bring it back down. So the shape that you are creating is basically a V with little clapping hands. Oopsie. Not so. I'm expecting more precision from your drawings. So I'm doing it with a trackpad here. Now, the most important thing after this is to remember that this is a solid piece of metal. It's not, you're not drawing something that is a single object. So I'm going to come over here, and I just did a little bit of a highlight. We need to show the perspective and the depth. So what you've just drawn is the outline like this. So you then want to add the perspective. So that thickness goes down, along, and down. So that is then giving you that thickness. And then because we need something to bracket those claws together, again, this is not about creating a complex design. It's creating a functional design with key elements that, as you build in confidence, you can then really play with the designs. You could start going to town with a lot more detail once you understand the process, is to then add your bracket in between. And you can see it's exactly the same on the opposite side over here. So we're going to connect that. So, but to do that, the inside line touches the inside line of the perspective. The outside line, the outside edge here. Likewise, this one. And then this perspective is going to connect. And then just to make sure it's easy for you to then see what is, don't need this, thank you. I'm going to then just erase the bits we can't see. So you can now see we've created an edge meeting an edge. That's really important when you're creating technical drawings, is you show where those connections are. Without connections, you're effectively giving the production or the person who's making it, if it's not you, you're giving them a license to basically add their interpretation of where you think that connection is going to be. Okay, so it's very important to understand, because you might be thinking, going, oh, actually, I want this to sit inside, and then I'm going to have the claw coming round the outside of it, and this is all sitting on the inside. Whereas actually someone else might read it going, well, actually, she wants it to connect. So those connections are really important. Okay, so for those who have been in classes with me, you know my motto is, if you're looking at something detailed and it's a bit of a struggle. Even when we're drawing 2:1, this is still a small drawing. Go big. This is actually surprisingly small for me. I always say for when I'm teaching, whether it be in recorded or live taught, get a spare sheet of paper and just go big. And at this point, I'm not talking with a ruler. I'm just saying get a big old, you can do it with a biro if you want to. Just figure out the logistics and then scale it back down. It makes life so much easier if you're able to just shrink it back down and then position it in place. All right. So once you've done that, if I just zoom back in, you can see now we have the outside of the setting, the inside of the setting, and the perspective coupled with that bracket in the middle. Now, the last thing we want to do is obviously then connect the shank to the setting. And you could, quite simply, you could just literally pull them around like that, and that'd be fine. Just to show you, if you want to add a little bit more detail, you can do that. You can pull it up here, whatever works for your design. But what is essential you remember is wherever it connects here is where it's going to connect here, okay? Remember, if you start doing any kind of detail or any kind of drawing where it starts to kind of go, oh, I could drop that in there, and then suddenly it disconnects from what your previous viewpoint is. So if you end up connecting this here, but actually over here, you've still got it down here, you're creating two different drawings. So remember, the grid is not just there as a start, it's the support that will ensure that every additional element that you add remains accurate and consistent, okay? Now, I'm just going to show you. So once you've got the same rinse and repeat on your setting here is exactly the same over here, okay? And the difference after that is you are then adding the same lines here and here, which you can see we've connected down here to these lines here, which then gives us the ring width. Remember, width, not thickness. Thickness is your through finger view. Your side view is your width, okay? And then depending on if you have it if this were up here was just a straight line, then you would just carry this on up straight to here. If, as you can see, I've tapered mine up here, I've then subsequently tapered it here. All right. So what I am going to do is just jump back onto the video because there's something I added at the end. So you can see all of this. All right, you can see. Right, two things. One, at this point, you can see I am now going over it in pen. All right. This is very useful if you've got a very complex design and you've added a lot of detail. And so in terms of your additional lines, if you want to erase some of those lines because they're actually starting to distract from the complexity of the design, by going over everything in pen, you want to go over it in the finest pen possible. I use a 0.05, not 0.5. That may as well be a felt tip pen in jewelry terms. 0.05 graphic liner. I've got a stack of them. They don't last hugely long, but if you don't use it often, it should be fine. And I go over everything. So I'm then able to, you can see on this, it looks that much crisper. But what I particularly wanted to show you was, I will come back to adding those dimensions, is I wanted to show you, I'm just putting some tracing paper over the top. So you can see here, I'm actually adding trapezoid sides. So this is a point coming back to what I was saying about costing. Let's say you have a solitaire and you're working with the client. They go, oh, actually, what would it cost if I added, if I just popped some side stones? You can, with extreme precision, tell them the exact costings. You can map out exactly what it would be. Is it in budget? Is it not? There's no guesswork needed. So by adding this in, what you then do, you draw those side stones in. You can see I've done it with tracing paper, so I'm not having to mess up the original one. I then just need to measure those side what I've drawn on tracing paper, divide by my ratio, and then I have the exact measurements for those side stones based on the actual drawing itself. So you can then cost up depending on the color, the clarity, the type of stone, your supplier costs, etc. And you can then be really dollar accurate to the increased cost of obviously, or the additional cost that you would be looking at. So you can see I'm just measuring it up. Now, based on that, if you were then going to be looking at how you rotate it, that's the point at which you would be looking at then adding it to the side so you can see the impact it has on the side. So remember what I was saying, what happens, add detail on one side, the impact continues to the through finger. And you can see I'm now using that diagonal to then support where those side stones would sit, both on the side view as well as the through finger view. Okay, so you can see how it's really important to think about it as those three connections. Okay, so that has been a whistle stop. I'm conscious also that I want to make sure that I don't go sailing past too far past what I said the time we would take. Now, to complete this, yes, I expect everyone to take a little bit longer with a little bit more care to go over it. But what I want to do is show you the key and the most important elements that are involved in constructing this. So at this point, I'm going to now recap the dimensions. And you saw, if I just scroll back, this is the point that you then also want to use your lines. You don't want to put your dimensions too close over your design. They'll just get in the way. Equally, you don't want to put them so far apart that if, let's say, gets sent to a workshop, they photocopy it, it gets cut off the edge. All right. So you want it to be close enough that it's relevant, not so close that it's kind of starting to kind of float off the edge of the paper. All right. So you are going to look at your key dimensions. Okay. The other thing, I'm just going to circle back to when I said about adding design. Let's say a client says, oh, what would happen if I put a halo over the top? You could then, with tracing paper, simply draw a halo over the top, sketch it. Apart from obviously we've established you can cost it, but it gives them a chance to then go, oh, this is what the solitaire would look like if we did put a halo over the top. Or you could say, well, actually, what if we did a half halo or those side stones? So you can see how even when you've done a technical drawing, you can still kind of use it as a design reference if you have a client who's wanting to do edits. Obviously, this is relevant for custom work, but it expands into a whole host of different applications. So once you've drawn your little lines, you're then going to add the dimensions. Crucially, the dimensions you are going to add are not your as drawn. They are going to be your actual. If you draw your as drawn, you're basically going to be creating a bangle. You want to create if I pop this in here, you want to make sure you're referencing back to these ones. So all the dimensions you put in place are your actual dimensions, not the as drawn. Remember, if you're sending this to someone or it's going to be printed, you don't know what they might blow it up, they might shrink it back down. So the reason we scale it 2:1 is to make sure we can do a crisp drawing that is ratio precise. But actually, we need to make sure that the references, the dimensions, and everything else that pertain to any form of numerical reference are specific to the actual number. Okay, so that's going to be key. And then just to recap what those dimensions are, the stone is 7 by 7 as we've drawn it. The shank or the ring width, not thickness, is 2.5. The stone depth is 4. The ring size is 16. Again, everything's in millimeters. And the ring thickness, the shank thickness, is 1.5. Okay. Again, all of these are noted on here. And actually, before I share this, I will actually just go over that. I'll just type over it a little bit more clearly so you have those references. So I would 100% recommend at this point, rinse and repeat. That's my biggest recommendation. Like whenever you're learning, you can learn as much as you like in a class, unless you practice it. It will not, you will not get that muscle memory. And it is muscle memory that will make this a much easier and less intimidating. If it is, it shouldn't be. But if you are going, oh, I couldn't do this on my own, then it's that practice. It's that ability to just kind of double back, and you'll be able to be able to then just kind of repeat. I'm just checking in on the chat, and you can repeat it based on any design. If you're looking at this going, oh well, how would I'm quite comfortable with this. I'd like to be able to practice. What would I add to it? What you can do is exactly what I did with the tracing paper. First off, repeat what you've done in the class straight up. Secondly, add a side stone. Just simple as that. Think about, and I'd probably go with just something like a round stone. Don't complicate it. Just add a side stone. Think about how that would then impact your through finger and the side view based on obviously what those messages sort of can't lose my train of thought based on the reference with that tracing paper. And coming back to this point here, what they would do to those additional viewpoints. Ultimately, if in doubt, refer to the grid. Okay, the grid is everything. Okay, if you don't have the reference of if you are kind of starting to feel like you're kind of not sure where something's positioned, just go back to the grid. Go back to your kind of your top view is kind of almost like kind of your safety space. Come back up to the top view and then follow the lines back down. Okay, that's the kind of the safest way to just kind of make sure you're being accurate. Right. I know people will still be drawing. So what I'm going to do is do two things. One, if anyone has any questions, I'm going to throw it open. One thing I am going to do, and I have had a few messages on Instagram, is I am going to give you guys a quick behind the scenes, which I don't actually have normally, of the main program, because quite a few people will be have asked to see that. The one thing I have seen in terms of the shared folder, let me drop that into the chat, but it will also go out on email. Okay, so I will find that in our chat, and then yeah, so we're going to end up, okay, copy the link. This is the link that will have that has the templates, will have the additional references I have also said. So oh, let me, sorry, wait. There we go. So you've got the chat there. That in the chat there is the Google Drive. So please copy that. And I'm just going to show everyone, pop over here. So this is based on a couple of messages from people on Instagram. Is for those of you who are saying what are the other courses, just to give you an idea of what is in the program. We have illustration, design, drawing, and what you guys have just done. Now, sneaky peek in here, I'm actually showing you the admin back behind the scenes, because you can see there are still a few little modules in draft, so you get to see which ones there are. So what you've done is you've looked at the technical drawing solitaire, which is the solitaire grid. So actually, sorry, the solitaire ring. So that's what we're looking at today. So in terms of drawing, obviously technical drawing itself is a big topic. There are a lot of different variations to it, and actually the additional elements of perspective, etc., you can actually then see are also kind of covered in a whole host of different exercises, from complex shapes, gems on a curve, and then importantly design sketching, which is freehand sketching with a very specific design angle. The other question that I know people are asking about are the illustration ones, which is exactly the same. You can see in here, again, each of these modules, we've got everything from complete beginner, you never have to have worked with it, through to bit topics within the cell. So I'll show you've got cabochons within the gemstones. Within the gemstones, we also then have, well, I'm going to break it down here, individual gemstone cuts. So you can see there's a whole range, which from a login perspective is what you would see here. And then just give you a quick peek of what the classes look like. You can see It's me, my hands, a lot of talking, and step-by-step guides, as well as obviously you've got your downloads, etc. So that's just something I know that a few people had been asking me about. Um, the other thing that I am going to that I am adding to anyone who has been in the masterclass and it's going to be up for the next couple of days is if anyone does want to join the program, that is current, it's lifetime access. At the moment with 50% off is you also get a bonus 2-hour one-to-one with me. That might not be a bonus. Some people might be like, no, I've had enough of you. But if you, as part of it, I appreciate a lot of people do kind of feel like they just need a little bit of like personal support. So that is something that anyone who has been in the masterclass would get a bonus 2-hour session with me that you can use anytime in the next 12 months. So that is something that I will then keep open for the next couple of days. So apart from that, I know there have been quite a few kind of questions that I think Chris has been fielding. If there is anyone coming in.
Two questions from the chat.
Just, yep. Two questions are.
So one is, with a lot of people designing jewelry in Procreate, do you anticipate a shift to technical drawings to Procreate as well?
So technical drawings to Procreate. That's a really good question. Procreate, and I know actually a couple of people on here who I have chatted with are Procreate, are proficient on Procreate. As they will know, Procreate in itself is a skill set. It just because it's computerized or it's digitized, it is not a shortcut. You still have to invest the time to be good enough. In terms of the kind of digitization, I actually am seeing quite a swing back. Yes, the industry is embracing, and there's a huge amount of like, there's CAD, there's Procreate, there's 3D printing. I would say clients and high jewelry houses are 100%, they are demanding hand skills as well as Procreate. They go hand in hand. But they are by no means that I have seen replacing the need for hand skills, because actually when you're kind of, if you go to 3D printing, you are still needing to understand all those tolerances. What I find a lot of people who like to learn technical drawing by hand is because it's quite like literally, it's, as you've seen, pencil, paper, and a ruler. It's learning the two symbiotically, but actually if you create in technical drawing by hand, you can translate it into CAD, but you don't have to. So depending on the type of finish, whether it's being hand fabricated or 3D printed, if it's being hand fabricated, it could be technical drawn by hand and go straight to hand fabrication if it's a bespoke piece. If it's something that's maybe more production focused, then it would go to CAD and 3D printed. So it depends on the type of jewelry, but a lot of the a lot of them are, I would say it does depend on the area, the arena, but all of the fine jewelry houses, they have a prerequisite of gouache and hand technical skills as part of their designers criteria. Do you have a jewelry design course in Photoshop or Illustrator? I don't do, no, well, I'm going to slightly clarify. So I'm jewelry design, or design, is creative thinking. Technical skills are your visual language. So I would put jewelry, so in terms of your visual language, Photoshop and Illustrator. I don't do that as a specific course. I personally am proficient on Photoshop. I find it very useful as a supplementary skill. I don't do that. However, I do have private training across a host of things that I can customize depending on obviously different types of skills. So if you wanted to do something that's focused on Photoshop, I can do that privately, but I don't do that as a main program. Mariam, yes, if you drop me a line, hang on, let me just pop Nathalie@asia.com. Yeah, Mariam, if you just drop me an email and I'll follow up with you on that. Was there anything else that I've got a few other questions.
There was another, is there ever a masterclass teaser on design and inspiration for having a pool of ideas?
Okay, so I don't do masterclass on design. I haven't yet. I don't have plans to at this point. I think the challenge with design is because it's about the way you think. So I put design into, well, jewelry design in general is to me kind of two arms. You've got your creative and you've got your visual language. Creative is how you think, it's how you process the world around you, it's your visual stimulus, your inspiration, and it's your ideas. Your visual language is a technical skill. And that's technical drawing, speed sketching, design sketching. It's anything to do with your visual language, including gouache illustration, watercolors, anything like that is a technical skill. So I put them under two camps. The reason that I wouldn't at this point plan to do a masterclass for the design side of it is because it's very hard to kind of go through basically how you think and how you look at sort of processing inspiration in a 60-minute session. It's more of, because it's much more kind of research focused, so it's much harder to kind of compartmentalize into a masterclass setting. So at this point, no plans for that. But if I think about how it can be translated, I will. But at this point, not yet. But again, there is a design part in the program. I only kind of cover the technical drawing, the drawing and the illustration. Is actually 3 courses in the program, of which one of them is design. So if that helps. Charge for one-off drawings. Knowing possible. So I don't at the moment. So when I do a lot of my drawings, I do as one-off, as part of a project fee. So I don't do it as a standalone. I am sometimes contracted to do illustration projects, because obviously that is one of my specialty for brands. But most of the time within my private client work, I keep my the illustration part of it is and the design part of it, the drawing part of it is part of a project fee rather than a kind of an individual point, because you're right, it is very hard to kind of compartmentalize it price wise. But coming back to what I said about the different applications at the very beginning, if you are able to if you create a technical drawing and then you put it into a sort of an illustration format, you can duplicate the amount of work you can produce without it becoming something that's overly time consuming. So you are able to create a kind of, still have that hands-on element, create that the design work without having to then kind of necessarily double the amount of time you're spending on it. Can we practice this class subject again and reach out to you? Absolutely, you can reach out to me on Instagram. I did also just pop my email up here. I don't know. I'll read it. I don't know if I'm going to be inundated, but if it encourages people, I think that's a great thing. I always encourage people. I want to kind of be as accessible for people as possible. As I said, if people do want to join the main program, I do a weekly Q&A. So anyone in the program, you have a permanent pass to you have the lifetime access, and a permanent pass to the weekly program, which the weekly Q&A, where I'm on live with all of our enrolled students, and anyone can turn up with any questions, or you can just turn up with no questions and listen to other people's questions. So it's not a class specifically, it's very much a Q&A, so that even though it's a self-paced program, you still have a weekly kind of check-in and accountability, and a way to kind of make sure that if you kind of want to go, oh my God, I'm stuck, you can always reach me. So there are always going to be the weekly Q&A. Marique, yes, very good point. It's starting this month. So Marique is actually in the program. So yes, that is going to be starting this month. I'm probably going to, because we've got people all over the world, we're going to be I'm going to be rotating the time zone. So we'll be doing it as much as possible, because we have people both in Asia and also North America. Everyone in Europe kind of sits comfortably in the middle. So we will be testing some different time zones on the Q&A. But go. Yep, no worries. I know a couple of people are jumping out. School run. Yep, no, I have to say I we palmed the school run off on a grandmother today to make sure that with the kids weren't left late. But yeah, as I said, if anyone does have any follow-up questions, you can message me on Instagram. If you don't follow me on Instagram yet, let me just follow that. So that's my creative official. Make sure I spell it right. If you don't, you can follow me on Instagram there. It's me who answers it. This is not a big team. It is me myself. So if you message on Instagram, it will be me answering. You've got my email on there. If anyone does want to jump in and enroll between over the next couple of days, you will get the extra private session with me. If you are already enrolled, I know obviously a couple of you already are, then you will get that as part of an add-on. So don't worry that if you are already enrolled, you will get the extra 2 hours with me by default. But if anyone does also then want to do that, and oh, someone's just PM'd me what else is in that. So let me just let me a sec. Sorry, someone's just asking what else was on there. So what is in there? That is in there. So you get the drawing course, the design course, the illustration course. You get a 1 hour session with me. The 2 hour session is a bonus for masterclass participants only. Lifetime access. Oh, I am going to be sorry. I have recorded but not edited, so it is coming soon. 50 tips to starting a jewelry brand mini course. That is also so signature program participants get that as well. So that's everything that you get on the program. Yes. So apart from that, if anyone else has any questions, you can also unmute yourself. Otherwise, I said currency fee is this one is it's in US dollars. So well, US dollars 835, GBP is 610. That is just for everything, lifetime access. And yeah, unlimited sort of to across everything. So yeah, I think that is everything in there. So any last questions, feel free to either unmute, otherwise I will tie this up. Yes, 100% Paddy. Yes, it is very much recorded for that reason, because it's whistle stop tour, as well as then I will make sure, don't forget, I'm just going to make sure that you get that link to the I'm going to paste it down here. Please make sure you get this, because the link is not going out to the general. There will be a follow-up email with the link to everyone who registered, because I know some people registered but couldn't make it. The link to the Google Drive is only for people who are here live, so make sure you grab that. But otherwise, please stay in touch. Let me know how you're doing. Any other questions, do drop us an email. But thank you so much for being here. This is the largest group I've taught. It's the start of a jewelry revolution. But yeah, it's been really so enjoyable to have everyone. And if anyone has any questions, well, that was an overcast crowd. Yeah, just feel free to ask me anything. So I look forward to either seeing you on Instagram, in email, or in the course. So thanks again, everyone. And I will follow up with the link later today. Take care. Bye.